So let's say, for example, I wanted to design a room with a floor, some walls, maybe a window, and I wanted to start with this box. It would mean that I would need to scale this out, right? Well, this is where we need to pay close attention to, in the sense that when we talk about scaling, like I said, if I were to just click on S to scale, constrain it on the Z axis by clicking Shift C and stretch it out, let's say 16 times by typing 16, and I scroll out a bit, you can see that the edges over here are stretched. And why is this happening? Remember that we talked about this cube over here having a texture projected on the surface. Now, if I were to go to this UV editor, and of course I tab into edit mode over here, click on A to select everything. So if I were to go to this UV editor over here, you can see that it doesn't really represent the shape of this newly modified, floor that we have here. And we're going to fix that shortly, but let's continue modifying this shape to have our floor, our walls, and all that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add a wall. So I will just come over to this corner here and Control R to slice it up. Click on it the first time, and I think I like 0.9 as the distance over here. And I will go again to create another wall, like the base for the wall. Control Alt, slice it up, and minus 0.9 should be okay. Yeah, 0.9. All right. So what I will do is I will click on 3 so that I can select this surface here. Of course, I will click on the period key to bring it to my view. Shift select multiple faces. And now that I've selected this, this will be the base of my wall. And I can click on Shift D to create a new mesh and just click on Escape. Then I want to separate this selection, this newly created selection, from the main object over here. I can do so by clicking on P. That's because it's a shortcut key. Or I can go to Mesh, go to Separate, and you see Selection. So you're going to separate by selection. And once you do that, we can tab again out of Edit mode, and we now have two separate objects to work with. So we have the base of, our room, and we have this L shape for the wall. And I want to focus on this L shape so that I can edit this for the wall. So let's say, for example, I wanted to make it taller. I can go to the edit mode by clicking on tab, and I'll click on A to select everything, E to extrude and bring it up a bit. So let's say by 8 is fine. That's fine. Okay. So now we have this over here and it's looking good. However, I know that we're having some issues with the textures over here. We're going to fix it up a bit. So the next thing I want to do is, let's say I wanted to add sort of like a glass window area over here. I can separate this face again because we have two different textures or materials. We're going to be having the wooden material that is attached or assigned to this wall, and we're going to have a glass material. So I need to select this surface here and separate it once again. So I will just ensure that I have only these faces selected. And once I have that selected, Shift Select, I will click on Shift D to separate the face again, Escape, and click on P, click on Selection, and now I've been able to separate that face from the wall. So we're going to go back to Edit mode. Now remember, what we're trying to create is a room. We have the floor, we have the walls, we now have this base for the window. Good, we're making progress. So once we've done that, again, we're going to tab into Edit mode, click on A, click on E to extrude it, and let's say we have this, and this is okay. And again, I might want to have, just some thick wood over here as the top of the window, so I can ensure that I select these faces one more time. Click on it, shift select, and once you select everything, we can go again to click on shift D, separate it, click on P, separate selection, and tab out of edit mode. Awesome. So we have our floor, we have our wall, we have our window, and we have a base for the top of the window. So we're going to tab again to edit mode, click on A to select everything, click on E, and we now have this right here. And this is looking good. Awesome. So now we have to remove this headache of the textures looking all wonky, and this can be fixed pretty easily. Now, please pay attention to the order at which I'm fixing it, because from experience, I've noticed that the order really matters. Now, there are many ways to do this, but this works every time. I will click on the floor objects over here, and what do we want to do? We want to ensure that this texture that is projected to this object is properly mapped around the object. Now remember that we scaled up this floor, from a cube to now being a flat, cuboid floor. Now all we just need to do is to apply that new scale to it so that it no longer reads being stretched 16 times or 16 units by the X or Y axis, but now it will now register this as a new object on its own, having the scale 111. The simple way to do that is by clicking on the object. You click on Ctrl A, and you can now apply the scale. And once you apply the scale, you can see over here that we now have the scale as 111, and this is what we want. Now, if you notice, this texture looks pretty stretched, right? And this is just like buying a wallpaper and plastering it to a wall. And for some reason, you had to reconstruct the wall, and the wall got sort of bigger. It means that you would need more amounts of wallpaper to stretch on that new wall surface, right? And that's the same idea. So you have a bigger shape that you need to stretch the texture, to cover over. So what we usually do is we now have to unwrap the object, because before it was a cube. We unwrapped it, and of course, just like as you can see here, I'm tabbing into edit mode just so you see. So you can see that we have the cube, we have new dimensions, assigned to it, but it's not properly reading all the sides to it. It's not properly reading the dimensions for this new shape. But what we just need to do is to have a new unwrap, and we can now project the texture to our new unwrap. To do so, we'll ensure that we are in edit mode. We select everything by clicking on A. You can go to U, and you can see that you can unwrap it, that's manually, or Smart UV Project. I usually go for the Smart UV Project because it does the work for me. Now, Smart UV Project helps Blender to identify the new shape or dimension for that object, and it's going to project the texture properly to that surface. I'm going to click on Smart UV Project and leave everything as it is and click on OK. Now, if you look at the shape over here, you can now see that it's properly stretching out the surfaces for this object. And if you look closely, you would see that it's now properly reading the textures to it as well. So I'll just need to fix up the scale over here and increase the value. Let's say 8. 8 should be fine. Now, I'm going to tab back into object mode, and you can see that the texture is now projected on the surface and stretching out properly, and it's better. Now, if you look at this texture over here, you would see that it's not seamless. It has sort of some lines over here. And this is one other point that we need to note, that it's important to use seamless textures. We'll get to that shortly. So let's just fix up the other textures over here. So I'm going to do the same thing for the wall. And once I have that there, pay attention to the scale and apply the scale, Control A, apply the scale. And I can also go ahead to tab into the edit mode, click on A, go to UV, Smart UV Project, and that's good to go. Same thing with the rest. So for this, I can also do the same thing, apply it. Control A, apply the scale, tab into edit mode, A to select everything, and you can actually just tap on U and you'll be able to see this option, Smart UV Project. All right. And because we have this as our window, we might want to remove the material that is assigned to this. I will tab out of edit mode so that I can get to the object mode. And once you go to select the window, for example, you can now apply a new material to it. Now for this, because this is what is selected, you can remove the material by clicking, sorry, I did that really fast. You can remove the material by clicking on this, cancel sign over here. Ensure that that is the object I selected. And once you do so, click on remove and you now have that gone. Remember how we're able to create the water, kind of look and feel in the earlier chapters? You can try this out and see if you can work on the IOR and the transmission to create your effect, your glass effect. All right.